Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Expert Chat session. Every Saturday, we bring to you the experts, the veteran in the field, those who have the knowledge to share with the students to understand how they can make career into it and how they can, what kind of courses that are needed, what is the eligibility for it, and what kind of scope it is offering, and how much it is demand in the industry when it comes to job market. And one of the career that is comes first in the mind of the people is the management. Whenever they think of a corporate sector, management is very fascinating, and many students from varied field are attracted towards the job opportunities the management offers. But one of the things that management and research is something people don't combine together. So today we have an expert with us, Mr. Kiran. He'll be talking about the career in the field of management research. And in that journey, Sunanda Rao will be taking the session along with Kiran to understand the scope, the kind of personality that is needed, and how you can get into research with the management uh, thing. So I welcome Sunanda Rao. Sunanda Rao, she is working with me on multiple projects. The concept where that is a career guidance portal we have, and then a career magazine that is Career Beacon. It's a ready reckoner for each and everyone, be it parent, be it an educator, be it a student. And we continue to bring the series so that uh, in the education field things can be simplified, and the students who cannot take the career mentoring and cannot afford to have a career mentoring can reach out this magazine, read the articles, and have a better understanding what it takes to be in that particular career, apart from just the eligibility courses, the kind of personality that is needed, the kind of skill that is needed, and how you can excel yourself in that particular career. So today, Sunanda will be talking about with Kiran on the career in the field of management. She herself is a career mentor who's been a regular columnist in a national newspaper, Amar Ujala. And Sunanda, please, I to please take the session forward and enlighten all the students, parents who are joining us.
Thank you so much, Kavita, for such a lovely introduction. And yes, as you rightly said, management is a very attractive career that we can ever think of. In India, especially the science-led research management has taken the wings in the last 1 decade, with attractive remunerations and the professions also providing a good alternative for the individuals with PhD degrees who wish to keep their careers into the non-academic research related to the roles. Now, today's managers are having a huge demand. First of all, they need to understand the scientific findings and incorporate them into the decision making. And research always facilitates the effective management. The prime managerial value of the management research is that it reduces the uncertainty by providing the information to improve the decision making process. Now, as we know, we are already into a such a VUCA world and uncertain precedent times are going on right now. Maybe this is the right time that we should have a speaker who is going to talk about management research and the careers related to it. Now, to have a complete discussion with us, today we have somebody who is called Kiran, who is a PhD candidate from the strategy area of IIM Kajikot. He also holds a master's degree from Xavier Institute of Management, Bhubaneswar. He has worked extensively and spanning prominently in the corporate organizations like ITC, Perfetti, Van Mille, and Dabur. He also worked as several in the several business schools as a visiting faculty. He has ensured that he has actively mentored the prospective managers. He has authored many of the case studies, and during this pandemic time in the Hindu business line on the COVID and the workplace dynamics, he has actually shared a beautiful article. So with this, I would like to welcome Kiran to our excerpts, expert chat, and to share a perspective of what exactly is management research, because these two are the two different fields, Kiran. And all of a sudden, when we heard about this thing, so we thought you are the right person to deliver this talk. So welcome, Kiran, and please share your views.
Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Sunanda and Kavita, for such a nice introduction. Well, I'm a learner and I'm still learning the ropes of management research. But I have spent a considerable amount of time in the industry post my management education, and then, of course, subsequently a lot of time in academia also. So I have a fair amount of understanding as to how this management research domain works, and and it'll be really nice to share my insights with people who are keen to pursue a research-based career, but not necessarily in the field of pure sciences. So management research can be construed in two from a two perspective. The first perspective is that you do a management degree and go into the industrial research or corporate research kind of careers. And like you have firms like IMAB, SE Nielsen, who do market research primarily. There are other specialized research agencies also like Gartner, and there are the research wings of the consultancy organizations like McKinsey. So McKinsey has McKinsey Knowledge Center, Ben has Ben Capability Center. So that kind of opportunity is also there. So now McKinsey Knowledge Center, Ben Capability Center, this kind of organizations also recruit at undergraduate level from premier UG colleges. Like I know for a fact that they come to St. Stephen's, they recruit from SRCC, College of Business Studies under Delhi University. So that option is there. So you can those who want to first get a feel of how the industry works, like they can possibly do explore that path also. The other path is that you do a management degree and you get into formal market research or industry research or corporate research, as they call it. And there is another branch which they call as research, but which is not purely research. That is equity research, where you typically see those people giving those predictions and their insights on how a particular share prices would shape up for a particular organization, or how a particular organization would fare in the coming days. So that is known as equity research, but it's I and in my understanding, as far as my understanding is concerned, I don't see it as pure research. The second path in which kind of I'm more interested to talk is the domain of getting into hardcore management research, which for which you essentially need to pursue a doctoral degree in management. A doctoral degree in management is little different from a conventional PhD degrees in humanities, social sciences, or even in pure sciences. Now, how is it different? So there are some similarities with how they take the candidate pool for a management class in the postgraduate program. So similarly, there are certain quite peculiar things. I would not say peculiar, quite interesting facets of how a PhD class is constituted in a top class management institute, be it in India or abroad. So if you're going to pursue a PhD in management from say an IIM, so IIMs are the Makkah of management as far as India is concerned. So then your typical class would not have people only with a specific kind of degree, which is the case with, say, if you're doing a PhD in sociology or a PhD in physics. So if you're doing a PhD in physics, all your class would be having people with master's degree in physics, or typically higher degrees in physics or similar kind of subjects. That is not the case in management. So for example, in my batch, I have people who have had their education in development studies. There are engineers, there are, and within engineers also you have people from different branches. Then I have done a management degree and I worked in consumer goods organization. Then we have gentle people who have degrees in commerce or humanities. So that kind of eclectic mix that you get in terms of the candidate pool, that is a unique feature in management research. So in that way, it is quite open for everyone. So you can have a bachelor's degree in master's degree in law and go and do a research in pursue a research degree in management. This is the first part. Second part is that your past orientation in terms of your academic training or your work experience is not something that is going to either improve your case or deter your case in terms of getting a admit. So if you have a if you have been a great scholar in the field of, say, sociology, so and you have a master's degree in sociology, you worked extensively in the field of sociology, that doesn't mean that you will be at an advantage over, say, someone who has a management degree and has worked in a corporate industry and doesn't have exposure of field research. So man, as far as admissions to a PhD program in management in India is concerned, yes, your past achievements and other things are taken into consideration, but that doesn't put you at a disadvantage vis-a-vis someone who has had direct research experience. Now, of course,
That's really great. That's really great, Kiran. Now, here I have a question for the 10 plus 2 students.
yeah.
Now, in case, how do we get to know that whether the management research is my cup of tea or not? So, in case if someone wants to pursue their career or they want to craft their pathway in that, so how can someone decide on it? Or per se, a counselor like me, Kavita, or the NCC network, where the people have the counseling network, how can we identify that yes, this student is rightly fit for a management research thing or not?
See, what we do in research is we try to observe a part of the reality. So there is actual reality, then there is a presumed reality. Now, when I'm doing research, I am identifying a part of the reality. So that is my presumption. Then I am dealing with certain concepts. I know certain concepts by virtue of my training or virtue of my work experience. So, like for example, if I'm talking about leadership, right? So if I'm talking about leadership, leadership is a concept. Now I see a certain phenomenon happening in an organization. So I'm working in an organization, I see that people with certain characteristic traits do well in their career. Now I am curious, I am inquisitive as to how why does this happen, or how does this happen? Is there a method in this madness, or it is all serendipity? So in that context, what I'll do is I know the concept of leadership. I also have an idea of the phenomena, that is, certain people with certain characteristic traits do well in their corporate career. So then I will try and link these two things. That is what research is. So if at a young age you have this ability to connect the dots. So like for example, when I was in 10 plus 2, so I had not decided on a career in management research per se. I was keen to study management, but I was not very sure if I'd be cut out for management research. But what was important skill at that point of time, and continues to be a very important skill at this point of time also, is the ability to connect the dots. Seemingly unconnected things, you should be able to connect. That's the first skill. Second skill is that, like any research degree, it requires a lot of reading. So if you're not somebody who would likes to read and read beyond what is prescribed, so there are a lot of people who like to study the textbooks. There's nothing wrong with that. That's something that we should always do, because exams are important, marks are important. I'm not someone who will tell you that marks are not important. Marks are extremely important. We are in a country where it's extremely competitive to get into top institutions, and increasingly institutions are getting into an algorithmic mode. That is, they put your 10th marks, they put your 12th marks and your graduation percentage, and they decide a score on that. So even if you score very highly in the entrance examinations, if your past scores are not great, you will not get an admit. And this is something that is happening in, if you in IIMs and in other management institutes. And this is the model that will be followed by all others also, because this is management institute started this trend of having two examinations, and then other domains started following it. So be it law, be it chartered accountancy, be it any stream, it will start having all these kind of criterias, because there is no other way to filter. You have so many people. So having said that, so if you're studying beyond the textbooks, then possibly you are not cut out for research, because research means you need to be able to read anything that you can lay your hands on. And it could be as vain as, say, about cinema. There are a lot of people working on cinema and trying to link it with management. There is a lot of research, research in the field of cinema and management. Now you would say, how does this work? How can somebody, management is a serious domain and cinema is something which is seen as frivolous by a majority section of the society? At least even today, if you go to the middle class family, they will not say cinema is a very serious choice. But that there is a lot of work happening in that domain. So if somebody is interested in studying beyond what is there in the prescribed textbooks, has the ability to connect the dots and has a curious mind. So if you're curious as to why things happen, how things happen, is this the reality that I am seeing, or there is a certain thing that I'm not able to see. So if you have those kind of skills, then management research can be a very exciting field for you. And you should also be I would not say that you should be an extrovert or an introvert. That doesn't really matter in this domain. You can be an introvert. I've seen people who are absolutely introvert in their private lives, but when they come to the classroom, they are live wire. They set the class on fire. And so that people might dissuade you from saying that if you're an introvert, you will not be a good teacher, or you may not be a good in those collaborative research kind of thing. That doesn't work here. But what you should have is the ability to communicate well through your writing, because bulk of our work that we do is through writing. Like I wrote a piece for Hindu Business Line. I am in the starting phase of my career, so I'm writing for other journals also, which are academic journals. So if you do not have that writing passion for writing, and this writing is not your journalistic or creative writing, this writing is pure documenting something. Like for example, diary. If you are in the habit of writing a diary where you're just documenting things in a certain language which is comprehensible, and you able to make logical sense in that writing of yours, so then this career is cut out for you.
Okay, so what you are saying is any plus two student or 10 plus 2 student, someone who is in 11th and 12th, and they want to pursue their career in management research, the first thing that they can identify is whether they are able to connect the dots. That's one.
Yes.
Second, of course, they should be in a position to read beyond the textbook, not only
Absolutely.
textbook, beyond the textbook. And as a part of soft skills, you already mentioned that communication is something which is really important, so that how structurally the person is writing. Is there anything else that a student has to look into or imbibe the skills to be a part of this career?
See, one of the things that they see in a management while doing the admissions process for a management PhD is how keen you have been in your academic career. And that keenness is not something that is measured by percentage. Now that is where there is a major difference between admissions for a management PGP or a postgraduate program and a management PhD program. So the management PhD program, you have to typically write a statement of purpose where you have to kind of outline what you intend to do with your life, and what you intend to do with the degree, and the infrastructure and the amenities that you'll get by virtue of pursuing this degree. You have to be very clear in your thought process, and that comes when you know what we are studying. So for example, what happens in India is a lot of people are pushed into streams where they are not very interested in. That is something that might be detrimental when you are trying to get admission in trying to secure an admission for a management PhD, because your keenness to pursue that particular subject, be it at an undergraduate level, be it at a 10 plus 2 level, those kind of things will be asked, because the panel typically spends a lot of time with a PhD candidate, a candidate who is aspiring to get admission into a PhD program. Unlike a management PGP, to put it in perspective, my interview for PGP when I applied to XIMB, XIM Bhubaneswar, so I did it way back in 2010. So I applied for the process in 2008. So in 2008, my interview lasted for 10 minutes for the MBA program. My interview for the PhD program at IIM Kozhikode and elsewhere, wherever I applied, lasted for at least 40-45 minutes. So the panel takes a very keen interest in the person, because see, in PGP, they are producing a manager. You do a MBA, you become a manager, you get a placement, that's it. But when you are training somebody for a PhD program, you are putting your reputation at stake, because that person will be like you. He will be one amongst you. After a PhD, you will become a faculty in one of the IIMs, or you become a faculty in one of the top business schools, or even if you plan to go into industrial research, you will be known as somebody who has a doctoral degree from Indian Institute of Management or a similar kind of institute. So the reputation, damage that can happen by taking a wrong person in a doctoral program is much higher than, say, a person in a PGP program. So that's why the panel spends a lot of time. So people who are in 10 plus 2, if you're passionate about, say, so like for example, I had very high percentage in 10th. Now typically I come from a place called Orissa, and in the eastern part of the country where Orissa is there, people who have 90% and upwards typically prefer science. That's the dominant choice, right? I mean, you would agree. If you have a decent percentage in 10th plus 10th, you do science. There
Yes.
are no questions asked. So, and when I was pursuing my 10 plus 2, it was way back in 2004. There was no second option either. People didn't even have a choice of, even considering. So, commerce, arts were not even part of the consideration set. Forget about, thinking of an admission. But I realized very early in, ninth and 10th class that I wanted to pursue a career in management. And if I want to pursue a career in management, I realized that a commerce education will be valuable. I'm not discounting the fact that engineering education is bad. Engineering education from an IIT or from a premier institute is equally good. In fact, it prepares you better than an average BCom degree. But having said that, I knew my capabilities. I knew that, I cannot make it to an IIT or an NIT. So at best, I could have made it to a top engineering college in the state or elsewhere. So I made my trade-off. Now you can have, your own view on this, but my understanding at that point of time was that if I have to study management, then I must know the basics of management, and it can be best done either by a BBA or a BMS or through a BCom. Now at that point of time, this BBA BMS thing was not as good as it is right now. So had I been doing my 10 plus 2 now, I would have blindly chosen for BMS or BBS from Delhi University. So that was the first thing. Second thing was that because I chose a stream of my choice, I did extremely well in that. So I topped my junior college. I was a state rank holder. Now all these credentials, all these academic achievements matter. These matter when you have to make a choice between two candidates who are seemingly equal in everything else. Remember, India and Korea, China, these are all very competitive countries. There is an extreme high level of competition, and there is nothing that you can do about it. It is not going to go away anytime soon. So people who are in 10 plus 2, choose a stream which you like. So even if you have scored 95%, you like psychology, go for it. Don't think too much about, whether there is a career that can be made out of it, or those kind of things. I made a very good career out for me, in the corporate world, and I don't think there is any discrimination in the corporate world. There are a lot of psychology graduates, there are a lot of English honors graduates who do, very well in corporate. So that would be the first starting point that I would say to the people who are pursuing 10 plus 2. Do, because it is very important to do well in your acads, be it in 10th class or in 10 plus 2. And for that, it is very essential that you study in a stream which you like, and not something that you have been forced to study. I am.
Very well said. Very well said. Even we think here at the same time, because you need to pursue what your passion is, where your passion is, rather than being a forced chap wherein you're taking a stream based on your parents' choice. Very well said. So, the students who are watching us right now, or who will be watching us, in the few course of time, in the wherein we are telecasting this one. So, please understand, pursue your passion, and go to the area where you are strong. So your career path has to be decided then and there, and you need to go into that field and start with the option which is lucrative to you, not lucrative to other person, because you have to go and you have to actually join that path. Second, we talk about research. I know it's a very important field. In fact, I enrolled myself, but I got back because obviously that's not my cup of tea to read continuously. But there are certain myths which are associated with the research and management in research, especially. So I would like you to burst those myths so that whosoever is watching us can get inspired that how can they get into the research.
Yeah. So there are a lot of myths that we associate with being a PhD scholar, because that image is construed based on what we see in public domain, what we see in popular media. So the media's depiction of a PhD candidate is a typically nutty fellow with bespectacled guys who is continuously into books and those kind of things, and somebody who doesn't have any other hobbies apart from reading. Now that is very far from reality. uh, if I may put it this way, so in I am Kozhikode, we have a cricket team. And this is something that parents will find very interesting. So we have two fast bowlers who are the opening bowlers. Now one of the first bowlers is from the PGP batch, and he is a IIT Madras guy, so that kind of debunks the myth that IITians only study. And he bowls really well. And he's somebody, if you would have taken this cricketing career seriously, possibly he would have had a chance of at least making it to the Ranji team, if not anything else. Now coming to the second part, which is more important, the second fast bowler in our IMCO code team is a PhD scholar. He is a PhD scholar. He and we are we stay in adjacent rooms, so I mean we are pretty close that way. He's from Delhi. He did his bachelor's in computer science from IIT Delhi, and he worked in a top MNC. Then chose to do a PhD. Now this is the kind of profile you associate with a nerd. But having being with the persons for like at least for a year now, I can vouch for the fact that he plays cricket exceedingly well. He can sing a bit. He can do a lot of other things also. And so that kind of debunks the myth that you don't need to study a lot, but what you need to do is you should know. See, this is one thing that I have always imbibed in my life, and I believe all the people who are my batchmates in PhD kind of believe in this dictum. See, if you want to do a PhD or if you want to do a doctoral degree in management, you need to be really passionate about it. Otherwise, you'll not be able to sustain. It's very difficult to sustain if you do not have a genuine passion. Now, how does a genuine passion come from? The genuine passion comes from pursuing your own interest. If you do not pursue something which you're interested in, then obviously you will not like it. We never pursued a PhD because it has a lot of money in it. So obviously it has a very lucrative remuneration part that one tends to get after completing a PhD. That part I am not discounting. But having said that, that is not the end objective. If we, nobody would like to devote 4 or 5 years, productive years of uh, his or her life to a degree if you are not passionate about it. That's the first part. That's one of the myths that I want to debunk, that PhD graduates are not nerdy. Like for example, I see a lot of movies. I see almost one movie every day, something on that sorts, unless there is an exam or something like that. So I must have, like, ever since I took admission in PhD or even prior to that, I must have seen 300 400 movies at least, if not less. And I like to read a lot of fiction, not no nothing to related to management or serious non-fiction that we anyways do as part of our coursework. So I do read a lot of fiction also, which is pure fiction, all fiction. There's nothing to do with management. And there are a lot of other hobbies also that we pursue, because that I believe that you need to have a dash of art, literature, culture to keep your soul going. Because art, literature, culture, music, cinema, this is for the soul. So that's the first myth, that management PhDs or PhD. I cannot say about other PhDs in other domain, but certainly about my PhDs in management domain. We are a bunch of interesting people, and we are not as nerdy as we are portrayed to be in the popular media, or we may look like. That's the first part. Second part is that again, this is something that a society has created, and this is partly because earlier very few people pursued PhD. So the dominant narrative is that you pursue a PhD if you are academically brilliant, you are absolutely brilliant, in your academics, or if you are in a teaching job. So earlier, what happened? People used to join the teaching job after a master's degree or a MPhil, and then they used to pursue their PhD while working. A second category of people was that they were academically brilliant and they uh, went into PhD. Now, I'm not discounting these things. These things are still there. You still have very brilliant people who come into the PhD domain. You still have management teachers who are pursuing their PhD. But when I talk about full-time PhD program from an IIM or a typically top management institute, we necessarily do not have people who are really brilliant academically as far as the marks and percentages are concerned. Yes, they are brilliant minds. They're absolutely brilliant. But I've always believed marks are not a determinant of your talent. Marks are a pathway. Marks work as a signaling effect. That if you have high marks, it kind of signals to the panel that yes, you are serious in your studies, you are a sincere person, you are a hardworking person. But having said that, if you have a lower percentage in one of your so this is for people who have given their 12th examinations and are fearing that they may not have done really well. So I have a batchmate who got only 70% in his 12th. But what he did was he put in a lot of hard work in his undergraduate and he topped his undergraduate stream. That was again because he studied his undergraduate in a stream which he liked. So the key is studying what you like. The key is not marks. You can have all the good marks in all all parts of your career, but you might seemingly look very disinterested in your domain. Then you will not make it. Then PhD is not something for you. You are studying for marks, and marks you need those marks because you need a job. So then you are studying for a job. You're a prisoner. You are not a free agent. So I have this popular saying by Professor Nirmalya Kumar. So either you are a prisoner or you're a free agent. So if you're a prisoner of your desires of marks, so first 10th to 12th you'll be a prisoner of your marks and those kind of things. Then you become a prisoner of your salary. Then you become a prisoner of something else. So the slavery or that mentality of being enslaved to certain things will continue. You can never, your PhD is not something that you will never pursue. You might talk about it. You might say that the grass looks very green on the other side, but you will never leave your job or do something to pursue a PhD. Now, pursuing a PhD requires a lot of strength, lot of courage, lot of courage because you are. So I quit a very high paying job to pursue this career, and that is true for all my batchmates. People are, because if you would have done something else in this period, you would have earned much more. So there is an opportunity cost. There is a there is a part of this life which we are devoting to studies. So if you
That's
are a
good.
person who is a
That's
prisoner,
true, Kiran. Kiran, here I'll object. One thing, not objecting. I'm intervening in this. There are certain myths, like PhD students should use big word, impressive words, and while they are writing the dissertation. How Let's talk about certain myths, and I would like you to burst those myths. So, how important it is to use bombastic word while they are writing the dissertation,
no,
or big words, or something which is required? Is it required or
absolutely
not?
not. Absolutely not. See, what you have to differentiate, as I rightly said in the beginning, this academic writing or the writing that we do as part of our dissertation and when we write for journals, that is different from a journalistic writing or creative writing. You did not need to be a Shashi Tharoor, you know, to make sense in your dissertation. That is not required. Absolutely, I mean, whosoever has said that is completely wrong, is completely off the mark. I've read several dissertations as part of my coursework, and I can vouch for this fact that it is far from reality. You need to make sense. You need to be logical in your communication. So that is something that we do not teach in our schools. People have an habit, Indians especially have an habit of speaking in a roundabout way. I call it the jalebi style of speaking. I was also a victim of that. We will not come to the point straight away. We will
Okay, so
talk
then the second
about
myth is PhD has to be done by the young people because it takes year long to complete the PhD. So how would you burst this myth?
again far from reality. So I started my PhD when I was 32, and I am not the youngest one. Sorry, I'm not the oldest one.
Okay,
If I may put it that way, I'm not the oldest one. We have a person in our junior batch, that is a batch that enrolled this year. He's 47. There
okay,
is no age for learning. Again,
okay,
that's far from reality.
perfect. Now, some things about the PhD. It's said that PhD will lead to a very good academic career, greatly increase your earnings. Is it a true or is it a false?
See, people who come into a PhD program, like all my faculty members, for example, they have stellar academic credentials. They have the kind of mental acumen they have, the kind of talent they have. They could have earned much more in industry. So, if you compare your industry earnings with the earnings in academia, industry will always triumph. The earnings from industry will always be more than what you'll earn from academia. But there is a standard of life that you get in academia. See, that cannot be compensated. When you live in a campus, like I live in a bio reserve. So I am Kozhikode is a biodiversity zone kind of a thing. Amidst the forest, amidst the sound of cuckoo and the beautiful birds, the chirping of the birds and those kind of things. So that cannot be compensated by living in a some swanky apartment in Bandra. That there is no, that cannot be compensated. That's part one. Second thing, you in academia, you are the master of your own life. So there is no in time, there is no out time for faculty members. You can, you are free to run your life the way you want. But having said that, you have to take your classes. And I'm talking this from the perspective of IITs and IIMs. I'm not very sure about the private institutes, but I'm sure, in top private institutes, at least in XIMB and in elsewhere, that is the case. They follow the IIMs model only. That is the first. The second thing is that you can also contribute to public policy. So like a lot of faculty members are part of the planning commission, expert advisory committees. A lot of them sit on the boards of the corporates. Then there are a lot of faculties who are altruistic in nature and they want to give back to the society. So they are advising these small entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurship ventures, and those kind of things. So if as a faculty you can make your contribution, in multiple domains, in myriad of ways, like, you have, there is a very popular man who comes on the TV regularly. There's Professor Anand Ranganathan. He's a professor. There is Professor Gaurav Ballabh from XLRI, who is also, so you can also go into the political narrative side of it. So that option is also open as a professor. Having said that, the earnings are certainly better than what it was earlier, because thanks to Seventh Pay Commission and of lately, what has happened is that management institutions pay an incentive for publication. So if you publish in top tier journals, you get an incentive which is in lakhs, which is in few lakhs, which is effectively six figure salary kind of amount. And but publishing in top tier journals is not easy. It requires a lot of effort, dedication, and ability to withstand rejection. So the earnings are good. Earnings are enough to, as Mahatma Gandhi said, it is enough for your need, but not enough for your greed.
Perfect. So another myth is PhD will make one wiser. How truth is mentioned in this particular myth?
See, wise, what happens in India, at least I can say this for Indians, is that a lot of us suffer from Dunning-Kruger syndrome. Dunning-Kruger syndrome is that we do not know how mediocre we are. We believe that we are great, but actually we are mediocre. So, every other person on the street, every other troll on the Twitter, or every other person who is abusing somebody on the social media thinks that he or she is wise. So there is no dearth of wise persons in India. So without a PhD also you can be wise, but then you might be suffering from Dunning-Kruger syndrome. If you are really talking in terms of knowledge, so what PhD gives you is knowledge. Definitely that is something that I can vouch for. Both tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge. But whether it makes one wise or not, I don't know.
Okay.
You can, no amount of education or no amount of social background can make you. It all depends on you as a person. But yes, it definitely gives you knowledge. It definitely gives you perspective on a lot of things. Your breadth and depth of knowledge increases immensely because you read a lot as part of, and you interact with such brilliant brains. Where do you get to interact Karl Marx in the morning and then you are talking about subprime crisis in the evening? I don't see any other place where you will be, meeting with such eclectic batchmates and such dynamic people.
So after bursting the myths, let's come back to the track of the discussion. Now, when we are, what is the typical background of management PhD students? As you have already said that in your batch, you have multiple people who are from the different domain. But, as a whole, since students are listening, there we have counselors from NCCN who have joined us today. We have entrepreneurs who have joined us today to listen to your talk. Now, what is the typical background of a management PhD students? Are they the people who have already acquired some kind of, educational background plus corporate exposure, then they are back? And how is it different from Bain and Company? How about Korn Ferry and other places where the research people are invited? So if you can share some information about it.
Okay. So I will address the second part first because that is about industrial research. So now industrial research, the pathway to industrial research could be through a management degree or a specialized master's degree, or also through a PhD degree. Typically, people who join after a PhD join at a level which is slightly higher than what one would join after a management degree. And there are a lot of people from who have done a PhD in management and gone on to work for places like McKinsey, KPMG, BCG, those kind of places. So if that is something that you're aspiring for, then that option is also open. But having said that, a PhD degree in India, in IIMs, is designed to produce academicians or thought leaders. It is designed in a way to make you a thought leader, and not somebody who will work necessarily be limited to a corporate research kind of a setting. What happens in a corporate research is that your research interests are driven by the corporate you're working for. Like if I'm working for KPMG, so I have to, and KPMG's mandate is to work on diversity and inclusion, then I have to work in that domain. So if I want to say do some research on business history, I cannot do that. I have to work within the mandate that KPMG gives me. But academic research is different. Academic research, you have all the freedom. So when you talk about this loaded word called academic freedom, that's where it comes from. That's the second part. Now coming back to the first part as to what kind of people make it to a management PhD, there is, see, the eligibility criteria is pretty simple. You need to be a postgraduate if you are in a general stream like arts, science or commerce, and a BTech or BE graduate to do if you are from engineering stream with some kind of work ex. Some of the IIMs have this clause of having some work ex after your BE BTech, or else you can be a specialized degree. You can also have a specialized degree like chartered accountancy, company secretary, or cost accountancy, and go on and do a PhD. So we have also have people who have had a dental degree, a degree BDS, and they have done a PhD in management and now are working as faculty in one of the IIMs. So
Okay.
management that way is very open, and that stems from the fact that management is interdisciplinary in nature. Management doesn't borrow from just one field. So the original field of management started when Frederick Taylor, who is the father of scientific management, so he used the mostly the concept from science, because that's why it is known as scientific management, the laws of motion and time and motion study and those kind of things. Then you had the organizational behavior school of thought that dominated for next 20-30 years, which borrows dominate primarily from psychology and those kind of industrial psychology and those kind of domains. Then you had industrial sociology, which kind of shaped the management. Now you have information technology and all this artificial intelligence, machine learning, those kind of things which are influencing our management. So management has been very open that way. It has been open and very accepting of external influences. So and
Okay.
management has benefited from that whole thing.
Okay, I have a question here, which is put forward by a student who is pursuing his post graduation. That what is the selection process for PhD at the Mason Institute? What is the structure of that?
So the structure, as I said, is that there'll be an application form where you have to typically fill it up, and it will have some of the things like what are your research interests, what you intend to do, and it would also ask for references. And typically people give, some of the institutes, although they do not mention it explicitly, they prefer references from academics and not from industry people. But having said that, if you have been working in industry for like quite long, there's no way you will be in touch with your teachers or your professors from your undergraduate or postgraduate, so you can give industry references. That's the first part. The second part is your written, that you need to qualify a major test. Now, CAT is something that all PhD programs in IIMs and some of the other institutes accept. Apart from that, you can also give GRE or GMAT. Now, there are a lot of institutes who also accept this UGC NET if you're a JRF. That is a junior research fellow. Now, UGC NET is an exam that is done for lecturers eligibility, that kind of a thing. Now, if you clear that exam, you get a NET certificate. But if you clear that exam and perform well and figure within a certain range of people of candidates, then you get a JRF, which is Junior Research Fellowship. So if you're a JRF candidate, you're a JRF recipient, then also that option opens up. After this combination of your score, what kind of a score you have got in the qualifying exam, and what your profile weightage is based on whatever you have filled up in the form, you are given interview calls. So typically they will invite somewhere between 150 to 200 people for say 20 people who have to admit. So 1:10 ratio kind of a thing. It could be more, it could be less, but each area, in an IIM. And IIM has typically, 6, 7 areas. You have human resource management and organization behavior. You have a strategy. You have information systems. You have finance, marketing. So typically, each area will admit anywhere between 2 to 3 people. Now there is no hard and fast rule. Some years, unlike PGP again, you have cases where they don't admit anyone. The panel doesn't find anyone suitable, they will not admit anyone, or in some cases they might admit 4 or 5 people also. So there is no hard and fast rule as to how many people have to be admitted in a particular year, but a thumb rule is that at least 2 people will get selected per area. And this selection is based on a composite score of how well your profile has, you have built your profile over the years. What are your qualifying scores in the entrance examination, whichever you're chosen to appear, and how do you fare in the interview? And that, as I said earlier, the interview is a fairly lengthy one, so you cannot faff your way out. So you cannot bluff something and escape through that, because 40-45 minutes interview, you have experienced people in the panel. There are 3-4 people in the panel, and one of them would be typically keeping a watch on what you are saying, what your body language is. So it's very difficult to camouflage certain things. So you have to be authentic, original, and very honest with whatever you say in that interview. And what
Okay.
is more important is, as to very specific answer to the person who has asked this question, you should have a demonstrated passion for demonstrated passion for research, that you need to demonstrate very well. And that could be through multiple ways. So like, for example, when you're doing undergraduate, your degree, if you have written for your college magazine or article which is not fiction, that kind of helps your cause. If I've written a journal article, like a lot of these engineers who study in IITs or elsewhere, they do their undergraduate projects with a professor and they author journal articles, or they go and publish, put their paper in conferences. Like in computer science, there are a lot of top conferences there where people go and present their paper. Or if you have done an industry project as part of your postgraduate degree or undergraduate degree, so that helps. All these things help. It all depends on how you put it across. You need to demonstrate that you have a passion for research, and there
Okay,
are multiple.
here I have a question. Since I come from an HR background, I see that many of the HR conferences, people call for the papers and the paper selection takes place. Obviously, we all know that the paper selection is not based on any of the data and the statistics. Though people at the stage they will say, okay, we have done these many things, how statistics have been read, what are the kind of thing. Then they earn, they get prize or their paper is published in the journal of their college book. Now, how important it is that you have to go in an authentic way, because here I'm going to put forward one question. I've seen people who come to us and say, okay, we sell the PhD degree, you can take the PhD degree from anywhere in the world and we will ensure to write your thesis and everything. So how typically is it validated by many of the people? Because I know PhD degree is a very renowned and one of the biggest scholar degree that we, but there are people who are already doing some business. There are agents who are already doing that. So how typically can we actually identify who are the fake or who are the fabricated PhD holder and who are the real PhD holders?
See, I believe in a very simple thing. If you want to do something, go to the best place that offers it. So if you want to do a PhD, go to a proper management, accredited management school. And
Hmm.
thankfully, all these tier 3, tier 4 business schools, they don't offer a PhD program. PhD program is only offered at present in India by the IIMs, by the schools of management in IITs, in the top 5, 6 IITs, and some of the top private institutes which have a reputation of their own. So, like for example, XLRI offers a PhD or SP Jain offers a PhD. Now, XLRI and SP Jain are very renowned names in their field. So, management, if you're willing to pursue a career in management, a research career in management, go for a PhD from a premier institute, because it is one-time investment and you'll be investing a considerable amount of your time. Doesn't make sense to take it from a shady place where some kind of wheeling dealing or some kind of hanky panky thing is happening. And I know for a fact that there are a lot many places where such kind of things are happening. There are a lot of places, there are a lot of people whom I know who have also acquired their degrees through that way. But let me put it on record. You will not find those people in top B schools. It's very difficult to get into a top business school as a full-time faculty if you have a degree, a PhD degree from a shady place like that. So I remember this conversation I had with one gentleman who is a top brand consultant, Harish Bijur. He teaches at SP Jain. So I just asked him casually, "Sir, why don't you take up a PhD? You already teach. You are the topper of your batch in IIM Calcutta, and you have that acumen." And he has written a book also. And he's somebody, I mean, he's very active on social media, and he writes columns for newspapers and all that. He said, "See, I understand that I'm not cut out for a full-time PhD, and I don't want to do it, from some third grade place university, because that will malign my credentials. So you are the brand. The brand is not the institute where you're going to pursue. So the call is yours, whether you want to associate your name with a shady place or not. Like for example, I would never associate my name with a shady setup, even in a advisory role. That's
Perfect.
that's a call. That's a call that the individual has to take. You
Thank you
can
so
stop
much.
that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kiran, because this is something which is very prominent. And of course, we as counselor, we almost get many of the agents who say, okay, we can get you the degrees from here and there, and this is the amount that you have to pay. And that's the reason why I wanted to put it in the records.
Also, another point I'll make it here, since you made, so this is an adjunct area, but so there are a lot of predatory journals, because what has happened is that UGC and other bodies have kind of mandated that you need to have a journal publication to get a PhD. So even if you enroll in a PhD, then you need a journal publication. So there are a lot of these predatory journals where they will typically send you emails. I get them dime a dozen every day. You publish here, you pay some money, they will publish anything. Now when you write something, when again you are associating your name with the right, and that is a documented evidence, it stays forever, it will not go away. Be sure that you are writing for a proper outlet. Now the journal list that we use in IIMs is typically the list that is used by the Association of Business Schools in UK, the ABS list, or Australian Business Deans Council list, which is the ABDC list. So don't fall for that trap of writing for any kind of setup. It is okay as long as it's a journalistic piece or a creative piece, but when you're writing for a predatory journal, you are associating your name with that, and it can have repercussions in your future career, whether irrespective of whether you're going to industry or you're going to academia, because industry also takes these things very seriously. They don't
Okay.
Nobody wants to associate your name with a fake setup. You have to understand that branding is everything.
Okay. Now here, again, adjacent to the same question, how is a PhD from Indian Institute of Management differs vis-a-vis to the universities which are there in US, Europe, etc. So, is there any change on trend? Because people have a tendency. I've done my PhD from US. I've done it from Europe. Maybe it may be an shitty college or whatever it is. But yes, there is a value added to it. So, if you can throw some light on it.
See,
I just want to share something.
I think somebody wants to.
Chitra, we'll take the questions towards the last, please.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. So thanks that you pointed out this piece, because we meet so many people like this of either in conferences or some places. Now let me tell you, earlier this was the case that we as Indians have a very strong inbuilt inferiority complex because of colonial rule or whatever. So anybody who comes with a degree from the white man's land, we think that that person is erudite and has a certain level of intellectual capital. That is far from reality. Not all people who study in premier universities have that kind of academic credential or pedigree to create and deliver knowledge. So and today, so earlier there were a lot of gaps because we did not have this thing called information technology. And just imagine, if you do not have information, you do not have something like Google or Google Scholar that we use often. How would you study? You would study in library. You have to go through journals. Now where are these journals published? These journals were published in US and UK. It would take at least a month for them to reach through airmail or through shipping, all those kind of things. So typically you will be late in accessing that knowledge which the person who is studying abroad would have already acquired. And that made a lot of difference. Also, our institutions did not have the kind of money to subscribe to a lot of physical copies of journals. Now all of that has changed with the information age coming. With the onset of the information age, all of those things are the thing of the past. Today I can read any journal that I want in the comfort of my home. See, like for this, ever since this pandemic stuck, all of us have been away from IIM Kozhikode. So I do not have the access to physical library, but I have the access to digital library. So I'm all my academic work has been happening. All our classes have been happening, and our classes are typically reading based. Our classes are not a lecture based class where we have to read a lot and then discuss. That's the first part where the changes happened. Second part, earlier Indian institutes of management, be it in the private sector or in the government sector, were primarily teaching schools, where the focus was on teaching. Kept a certain because you had very limited teachers. You cannot say that okay, 15 of you teach and 15 of you do research. Now this has changed. In IIM Kozhikode, we have 90 faculty members now, and every other IIM has at least 100 odd faculty members, 90, 100, in that range, 80 to 100 faculty members. And there are people who have been identified as scholars in their domain or emerging scholars in their domain who do cutting edge research, and their research is at par with what is being published in Europe or US. So that divide has also been bridged. But having said that, since some of the premier universities, if you talk, say for example, are we comparable to Stanford or Kellogg's or that kind of a thing? No, we are not. We are not, because they have had the advantage of starting out very early. So their PhD programs are much older than the PGP programs. Forget about the PhD programs of IIMs. So that disadvantage is there, and it will take some time. But having said that, there are a lot of B schools in Asia, like Hong Kong University, China Europe International Business School, Nanyang University, National University of Singapore. All of these have emerged, like they are amongst the top names in the world right now. So, and we already have, I am Bangalore and when I am Ahmedabad figures in the top list. IIM Kozhikode also figures in the list, as in, because a lot of our alums, again, that's another myth that I want to debunk here. Earlier it was said that if you have a PhD from India, you will only work in India. Almost 50% of our alums from IIM Kozhikode, people who have done a PhD, go and work in universities in US. Like, I have a senior of mine who joined University of Bournemouth recently. I have other seniors who work in University of Loughborough, University of Durham, those University of Bristol and those kind of places. So that myth is also been debunked. Increasingly, people with PhD from India are working abroad, in Europe and in Australia and in US and in many other places.
Okay, now I'm going to merge two questions which have come to me. First of all, what are the career prospects for the management PhD holders? Second is how a academia job or a PhD holder job is different in academia, and how about in corporate? What is the difference, and which is the best one to be picked up?
Okay, so let me answer the first one first. So as I said, the pathways are either you can go into academia or you can go into industry. So industry, typically, if you have a PhD, people have also joined in consulting, and that is in front end consulting roles. But majority of the people choose to join in the research setups. Like, I know people who have joined the TCS Innovation Lab. TCS Innovation Lab does some cutting edge work in behavioral sciences, artificial intelligence, and those kind of things. So there are PhD scholar candidates who have done their PhD in marketing or in behavioral sciences and have gone to work for TCS. So that option is also there. Similarly, there are other research wings of other corporates who also are interested to hire PhD grads. That's the first part. But having said that, bulk of the people, uh, uh, among us, majority of the people choose to go for academic jobs. In academia, typically, if you graduate from an IIM, if you graduate from a top tier IIM, then you preferably go and work in another IIM. So now, as a policy, the IIM from where you graduate, you do not work there. So, like for example, if I'm graduating from IIM Kozhikode, I will not be working there, as my first place of employment. This policy is taken from the American business schools, where to prevent inbreeding, and this inbreeding is the problem with all our universities. That's why they have become redundant and kind of decayed. because you do a PhD from the same place and then you go and work there. So you become part embroiled in the internal politics, and because you know the place inside out. So that as in practice is actively discouraged in IIMs. So typically, if I'm from IIM Kozhikode, I will typically go and join another IIM or a top private B school. That's the career path. Now coming to the second part of it, how also the another career path which is being looked at recently is to pursue a postdoctoral degree, because the demand for publications and having a research oriented profile is becoming so much, and you realize that if you join an IIM or any other private business school, you will also have to do teaching and other administrative job. You say that no, I want to devote my first 2-3 years after my PhD for exclusively for research, and you go and take up a postdoctoral position in universities in Europe or US, and that is also an option which is being increasingly explored by a lot of PhD graduates, and more so in the areas of economics and strategy and those kind of things, where there is a lot of advantage in going to a top tier university. Coming to the second question, as to how life is different in academia vis-a-vis industry. As I said, in industry, your firm determines your area of research. Like if give the example of
No,
KPMG.
I'm asking post, PhD. There are two ways. Either we can go to the academia, we can stick to the academia into the professor thing, or we can be a management consultant to any of the, private organization or to the
Okay.
organization or we can. So how
So,
the life differs?
there are two pathways in the corporate. One is, as Sunanda rightly said, you can be a consultant. So I was initially talking about corporate research, which is also a very dominant paradigm as far as industry careers are concerned. But since he broached the topic of consultancy, if you are a consultant, you live the life of a consultant. Simple. You will have a hectic life. You have, and typically consultant travel at least 4 to 5 days a week, because I know so many of my friends are consultants, and you get paid well. You have high bonuses and you have deliverables, because as you move up the ladder, as you move to senior levels in consultancy, you need to do business development also. So you need to liaison for businesses, you need to maintain your existing accounts. So all the things that comes with relationship management, account management, that comes in if you're a consultant. And it doesn't matter if you're a PhD or not. Yes, if you're a PhD, you have a lot of topics to discuss, and in top tier consultancy, you have to make a decision about the other person in a fraction of time when the initial discussion happens. So that the training that you get as a part of a PhD helps you in that. You have a lot of topics to converse on, lot of ideas. You are better trained in terms of problem solving, because you are exposed to so many facets of the literature, existing literature on the particular domain. You can easily connect the dots and solve the problem. And consultancy is all about problem solving. At the end of that, the client has to be satisfied. If the client is not satisfied, your training, your pedigree, your credentials, none of that matters. So consultancy is cutthroat, and in consultancy is you have to perform well, and it works exactly the same way for, say, a management graduate vis-a-vis a management PhD graduate. So there is no difference as far as a consulting career is concerned. Only advantage that you have is that you have more exposure to the existing domain of knowledge. And also consultants need to write these opinion pieces for newspaper and for their internal newsletters and those kind of things. So like for example, if you see McKinsey has a McKinsey Insights kind of thing, knowledge at or knowledge at what, and those kind of things. So if you are a consultant, you need to write extensively. So your training as a doctoral student helps you there. You are more adept at writing stuff at short notices, and putting across a tapestry of ideas and seemingly unconnected things in a structured framework. So that all those things, all those aspects you are trained for, and you that helps you. But otherwise there is no difference. That's the first part. Second part is terms of, if you want to pursue a career in corporate research. So as I said, if you want to pursue a career in corporate research, your research interest will be determined by the firm. You have to work within that ambit. within the boundaries of that. So there will be no boundary spanning element. So for example, if you are interested in business history and your uh, corporate that you're working for is working in some other area, then of course you need to do it on your in your own personal time and out of your own personal energy and investments. It cannot happen in the corporate the time that you have to supposed to devote to the corporate. Now coming to a career in academia, as I said, you are the master of your own desires and choices. Academia is very flat. You technically do not report to anybody. So director is the administrative head, but you do not report to the director, as in you are not accountable to the director for what you do in your day-to-day basis. And now for a tenured professor, the academic freedom is much more than any other profession. But having said that, when you join as an assistant professor of lately, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of competition, as in from that journey from becoming an assistant professor to an associate professor. When you become an associate professor, essentially you become a tenured professor. That is, you become permanent. That is, you cannot be dismissed without a valid clause. So that journey is little tedious. So in that journey from becoming an assistant professor to an associate professor, that journey is more or less similar to that of a corporate job. So if you want to say that want a very easygoing life, and you would have typically had this image of academics, having a very easy life, taking ample amount of vacations and rest. So that kind of thing doesn't happen in the early stages of your career. You get a lot of vacations. You have a 60 days paid vacation, every summers for the every summers and for other things also. So there is no dearth of leave, but people don't take that leave because people want to publish, people want to do cutting edge research, and that cannot happen if you're on a vacation. They take long vacations.
So much, Kiran. It shows the kind of passion that is needed in this particular career. If you're pursuing doctorate level or research level, it has to be backed by your passion. You should be passionate about it. And if you are passionate about it, it will take you to greater heights. And definitely, being in the education is a wonderful phenomena. And especially when you have said that like IIM don't hire their own student for at least for the first thing, so that I would say widen the scope of, because if people come from different culture, from different places, they bring USP from those particular institute also. So I think that's the reason why they don't take IIM, and we are running out of time. So that's why it was wonderful interacting with you. Uh, we had some questions. The audience wanted to ask some question. So if anyone has any question, please raise your hand. We'll just quickly take one or two questions and close today's session. Chitra, you had a question?
Probably, Kavita, in the meanwhile, while Chitra is, unmuting herself, there is a question on the Facebook, if you can answer that.
Okay, let me check on that. Okay, there's a question that what if I want to stay in my job and yet pursue PhD in management?
So what has happened, this is a recent phenomenon in India. The IIMs have started a executive doctoral program in management. So it is known in different nomenclature. So IIM Indore calls it executive FPM or executive PhD. So they get a PhD degree. In IIM Kozhikode, they call it PhD practice track. So that is one career that can be, that somebody can pursue. You can look at these executive PhD programs from top tier institutes, but executive programs come with a caveat, that is you need to pay, the fees are, there is a certain amount of fees that needs to be paid for pursuing this degree. And if you choose to drop out, then that investment is sunk. And typically that happens because managing a job and a doctoral degree, the demands of a doctoral degree is not easy. So if you believe that you can do it, then go for it. Else, do a thorough study or research before jumping into this domain.
Thank you so much for answering that question. I think most of the people have that in mind. We are already in a very good position, good job, good company. Why not to continue? So it
Yeah, that
needs
is there. See, I am not discounting that. See, executive PhD, there are a lot of people who have done executive PhD and doing exceedingly well for themselves. But unlike a full-time PhD, executive PhD may you need to balance your job, demands of your job and demands of your PhD program. So to expect that, the institute will be lenient towards you because you are doing a job, that won't happen. They will not be lenient towards you because if you get a degree from an IIM or from a premier institute, it has its own value, and that is because of the rigor and the relevance. So by virtue of being in the practice, will bring the relevance, but the rigor has to be brought in by the institute and the faculty who is driving that course. So they will not compromise on rigor only because if you are working. So if you are self-motivated enough, so I can give an example. The Ganesh Natarajan, who was the CEO of Gensar. So Gensar is a IT services company and is an arm of RPG, the RP Goenka group. And he did his PhD from IIT Bombay in knowledge management. He wrote 2 books based on his PhD thesis. So if a person like him can do a PhD, why can't someone who is in a middle management level? It's not impossible, but it requires a lot of courage and self motivation.
yes, courage, self motivation, determination, and passion. If you combine this together, then only you should think about doing a PhD with your current commitment towards your job. It doesn't, as mentioned by Kiran, there will be no leniency. You have to put in extra. You have to go extra mile to complete your PhD. There will be no leniency. There will be like if you're working for a project or something of a company, that will not be taken into consideration, that you are already in a job, so that excuse is given to you. So first think about it, take your time, that, and then take a decision to go for a executive PhD program. And Chitra, you have any question or we conclude today's session? So I think
No,
you
no.
have. Yes, Chitra.
Hello. I was just talking about the overseas PhD and the Indian PhD. The difference of timings and the practicality changes are there, or is it the theoretical part is more compartmental? That's what I wanted to ask.
Timing, what you refer? Could you please explicit that a little bit? What do you refer
No,
by
see,
timing?
what experience Yeah, what experience I have gone through is like, because I wanted to pursue a PhD, so I didn't go because I changed it to MPhil. See, my PhD question here is that the universities here take it to a pretty long, number of years. That is, they first told me 4 years, then they shifted it to 6 to 7 years, and they don't have many of the concepts which we want to do the PhD for. And whereas in overseas, they say that if they ask a tenure of 3 to 4 or 5 years, and they generally finish on with that. So what is the difference? I mean, is it the compartmenting is different in the PhD done in overseas, or it is the theoretical part which is more in India, something like that?
If I put,
Yeah.
Kiran, I'll just put it in 2, 3 formats. The same question. First is the number of years it takes to complete PhD in India or overseas. Second is the research topic. In case I want to do research on certain topic and the university is not having a research in that particular zone, uh, Indian universities don't entertain in overseas industries, entertain or not. This is one of the question from that also. So from both point of view, if you can answer the question.
Okay. So that's a very good question and a very relevant question also, because this is one question that I get asked by a lot of aspirants. Now, so there is a difference in which traditional Indian universities, conduct their PhD program and how IITs and IIMs do it, right? So even within IITs and IIMs, I am specifically talking about management PhD. I'm not very sure about how other PhDs happen. Like for
Sure.
example, IITs also have a humanities school. So in management, in IIM, typically you complete your PhD in 5 years. So if you do not complete it in 5 years, there have been instances of people who have not been able to complete in 5 years, Now there could be multiple reasons for that. One reason could be, they took a break for some personal reason. A lot of women take a break on account of pregnancy, marriage, or some kind of other problem, personal problem. So that is also there. And that the IM system is very accommodative. So that is a right of a human to take a break. But otherwise, if you have not had a break in your studies, you should typically be able to complete it in 4.5 or 5 years. And people have done it earlier also. So if you're in a quantitative stream, for example, like operations, you can do it in 4 years. So we had a senior who just submitted, who is a 2016 batch entrant. So he just completed his defense in 2020 recently. And next day he joined IIM Kashipur. In fact, he had got an offer from IIM Kashipur even before he completed his defense. So because see, it's not a wise decision to be stuck in a place, because after 5 years your stipend doesn't the institute doesn't provide you stipend, and after 5.5 years or 6 years they will ask you to leave the campus also. So you have to make your own accommodation arrangements and those kind of things. Now it's very difficult. Nobody wants to land in that kind of a soup. Doesn't happen. If in an IIM system it doesn't happen. And if you're delaying it inordinately, they will ask you to leave. Simple.
With respect to overseas, if somebody wants to pursue overseas the PhD in management, how many years it takes?
Overseas, it is much more structured. It is much more structured in that way because the faculty who is taking you, he or she has the onus to ensure that you are funded. So if your funding ends, so he cannot sustain you, and that funding is given for a specific period of time, or he has raised that funds for a specific period of time. There have been instances of people getting delayed in the overseas scenario also, but that is rare. People typically complete their PhDs overseas on time. They
So
may not do
funding is
very good work in their PhD. They might do a very
no,
shoddy work. But having said that, they ensure in the overseas, universities, they ensure that people complete on time. Now, she was asked also about the methodology and theoretical part of it.
yes.
Theoretically, IIMs and international universities are equally rigorous. There is
Okay.
no dearth of theory as far as theoretical rigor is concerned, because you read the same thing. Where
Hmm.
they score a little bit more is that, this is my personal opinion, is in terms of methodology. If you want study in Europe and US, the access to the new methods of research and those kind of things, they're slightly ahead of the curve. But see, in IIMs, all of us go and attend international conferences, typically top tier conferences like Academy of Management, Strategic Management Society, those kind of conferences every year. So either I attend or my faculty attends. So there is no way we do not know what is happening. So we might be a little late in terms of catching up, but it is not like earlier times you have 4G there and you have 2G here. If there is 4G there, in 2 months you will get 4G here also. That kind of a thing.
Yes,
Coming
yes.
to
Because I
topics
have
on.
attended one of the international conference. That is the reason I said, because I didn't see any difference about somebody who had done it from London and somebody who was done from Jain University, Bangalore. Both had the same kind of case history, same kind of data, and same kind of systems which they had managed through. So that's the reason I asked, is there anything special
No,
about
no,
doing
no.
it from
Now,
over?
see, now we have access to all databases. So be it
Oh,
Bloomberg, be it Thomson Reuters, you name any database, you go to an IIM, you will get everything. There is no dearth of
okay.
data. There is no dearth of information. There is no dearth of knowledge resources per se.
And
What?
one more thing, you were talking about the funding part. When the funding part is done in India, if we are again through a funded university and if somebody has sponsored us for completing this PhD, then also does the time lapse happen, or is it against, the caution is taken on the completion within the 4 or 5 years?
See, in India, the PhD is state funded. As
Yeah.
in, so in IIMs, my stipend are paid by the institute. So
Okay.
irrespective of whatever happens, irrespective of the recession, depression, anything happens, I'll get my stipend on time. So that is taken care of, and IIMs and IITs have a lot of the corpus that they have is humongous. There is no dearth of money as far as research is concerned, or paying stipends is concerned, and you get a very handsome stipend. Earlier, that stipend was very paltry. So now the stipend is fairly good, and you get a free accommodation.
Thank you
So
so much, Kiran. It is, I think the answer has been answered that there is no difference. You might see it might be a slight delay, but definitely I would say the level of education, the kind of experiential learning and theoretical learning, you will not find much difference which is there, and the kind of exposure this premium institutes are providing to the PhD students through the international, I would say, exposure through conferences or research paper. So that fills the gap which used to exist earlier. So with that, we conclude today's session. Thank you, Sunanda, for taking us through the entire session and breaking those myths surrounding with the management research, and Kiran for wonderfully, putting the things into context with the examples. It was like a case study you were putting up with each and everything, and it
Thank
was so wonderful to have you, and we really enjoyed the entire session, and I'm sure the students and parents would be really benefited by it, because it is all backed by the practicalities, the case studies, your experiences are there, and uh, it will not be like again a kind of कहते हैं हवा कहते हैं हिंदी में कि हवा is there for doing a doctorate in anything, and especially in management research, you have broken that myth that you can be passionate about your sports or music, and again do wonderfully well, as long as you're passionate about your subjects, as long as you are committed to it, you give your commitment, you are courageous to put extra efforts, and nothing can stop you from achieving it. Thank you so much. It was wonderful having you. Thank you, Sunanda. Thank you, Kiran, and have a wonderful day. And please stay safe, maintain the social distance because Corona is hiking. So take care. Thank
Yeah,
you.
do not take Corona, in a very light manner. Few of my friends have been affected, and I know how painful it is. It is even you cannot lift your mobile phone. That's so weakening. So please be safe. Also, next week we are coming up with an interesting profession in the expert chat, that is acting and media entertainment as profession. So we'll have Sunny Rathor with us, who will be chatting with Kavita, and I'm sure Kavita is going to drill him that how one can enter into the acting profession. Followed by that, we will have a bodybuilder, someone who is a gymnastic, who, running a gym as a career in the fitness. And followed by that, we will have a beauty industry expert and a writer, and so on. So we have all booked careers thing that is there. If any one of you who is watching and is excelling in your career and you would like to share your expert chat and join us as an expert chat mentor, please do leave your message number or anything on the chat box, and we'll ensure that we are connecting with you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kavita, for such a lovely introduction and the concluding. And lovely audience, stay safe. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you. So bye.
Thank you, Kiran.